Hey, what's up, people? So this is gonna be my very first video. I wanted to do a video of my own, telling my story and how I left the JW organization, mainly because I've watched a lot of different videos from different people, and they have really helped me relate. I've heard some things that are funny, some things that make me really feel compassion for people, but more importantly, things that I can relate to. And a lot of times when you leave the organization, you're kind of out there and feel like you're alone. And I really think a lot of these different ex-JW stories help people as far as therapy goes, with them just getting through things, but then also helping the other people who watch them. So I just wanted to make my first video. To me, a lot of funny things happened with me in the organization. I was born into it, and so my mother became a witness probably 6 or 7 years before I was born. So and she was a regular pioneer when I was born. So like most people, my weekends and my evenings and everything were filled with meetings and field service, and you know, not much time to be a kid when I was young. My father was not a witness, so there was that natural tension there, you know, with one worldly parent and one parent who was a witness. So, but he never really pushed back on my mom when it came to Jehovah's Witness related events, service and meetings or anything. You know, if she said I had to go, then I had to go. So I actually wish she had been a little bit more of a relief at times when I was a kid. You know, going back to when I was a kid, I was giving talks when I was about 7 or 8 years old. And, you know, I really, one thing that I think the organization does a good job of is teaching the youth how to communicate well, reading comprehension, different things like that, even though they do it with an ulterior motive in mind. And you know, they do teach you a lot of sales tactics too with an ulterior motive in mind. But I really, I took that positive away from the organization. I could read better than most people in my class, you know, growing up in school. And I have to think that a big part of that was because of the you know, being a part of the meeting, being a part of the Theocratic Ministry School and going out in field service and all the Bible reading and everything else. So I would always get complimented on my talks. You know, the elders and you know, everyone else in congregation would always say how, you know, you're going to grow up, you're going to go to Bethel, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. And honestly, at one point, that was what my goal was to go to Bethel when I was really young. So fast forward a little bit, you know, I had a normal witness youth, always out in field service. When I was 12 years old, my father died. So not being a witness, obviously, things were a little funny with some of the witnesses at the time that my father died. Some came to the funeral, some didn't. My father had studied a few times in his life, you know, mainly at my mother's request, but a couple things he couldn't get over was the disfellowshipping. He really firmly disagreed with that. He couldn't understand how an organization that was part of the True God's organization would just kick people out and say that you can't talk to your family. So he was firmly against that. Some other doctrine things, but you know, he never actually progressed past studying, and he would study for a while and then stop again. So my father died. My mother was really, she went into what I can only describe now, being older and knowing, you know, what happens in those events, a deep state of depression where she couldn't really do much at all. And the brothers would come over and sit with her and talk to her. But the only real advice they had, and I would be in the house listening, was to trust in Jehovah, pray to Jehovah. Jehovah will make it okay. Jehovah will make it better. Jehovah will heal your heart. And I just, even at that young age, I remember thinking they just don't get it. Like she needs more than that. And my father and mother had been together since my mother was a teenager, you know, so very young. He was the only man she had been with from that age all the way up until he passed away. So it was a very traumatic situation for her. And so during that time, she really fell into a deep state of depression. She stopped regular pioneering. She continued going to the hall for a while. And then eventually she just stopped going to the Kingdom Hall, and the brothers would come try to talk to her. And she just, you know, was, I think, fed up with life in general at that point. And was questioning everything, and she was angry. at everything and everyone. And so during that time, her attention to me kind of waned a little bit. So she didn't even care if I really went to the Kingdom Hall anymore. I still went because I wanted to go at that time. But then things continued to get worse. And, you know, as my mother kind of continued to slip into this state of depression, she just decided she didn't want to be a witness anymore. She was done with it. I still remember when the brothers came to the door. I remember, you know, them coming in and talking to her and her saying, no, I'm just done. You know, here's a letter. I don't want to be a part of the organization anymore. I'm done. I'm going to go do something else with my life. So, and they even came back another time to try to talk her out of it after that. And she said, no, I'm finished. I don't want any part of this anymore. So, she left the organization, and disassociated herself. Basically, they announced it from the platform. After that, I told my mom I still wanted to go to the Kingdom Hall. I still wanted to be a witness. So she said she wasn't going to stop me from doing that. So she gave me the numbers of the different brothers that we knew. I would reach out to them for rides. I think they came and got me once or twice, and then they just stopped coming to get me. And at that point, you know, I was probably around 13 or so when that all started to happen. I was confused. I didn't understand. I was just trying to be a witness still, regardless of whether my mom wanted to or not. I was old enough to make my own decisions. And I just felt like I was just left out there. I'm, you know, glad in hindsight that it happened, because it probably helped me start doing more research. But at the time, you know, 13-year-old kid, I felt like I was just betrayed by the organization, by the brothers, and, you know, at my particular congregation. Who knows why they didn't want to, but, you know, they just kind of decided, I guess, because my mother was this fellowship, they didn't have to worry about me. So, you know, from 13 to about 17, for about 4 years, I really think what I felt I had in the organization was a family. And I really think that's kind of what my mom felt too, because her family was far away in another state. And so with my father passing, it was just me and her. I have an older sibling, but he was growing it out the home. So she didn't have any family. And I think that's really why she was kind of in that state of depression and kind of lost out there. I didn't have any family because I felt like the witnesses were my family. When you're a child growing up in the organization, with the pioneer mother, like, I didn't have much time to really have true friends, who were just, you know, other than the witness kids, because everything we did socially was with the other witnesses. So, I basically went out and got mixed up with wrong crowds and got into, criminal stuff and a whole bunch of mischief out there. And from 13 to 17, I was out running the streets, living a pretty wild life. My mom still was kind of caught up in her own self and her own mind, and really didn't check in on me that much. I mean, I could be gone for a whole night and my mom probably wouldn't even notice. You know, like I said, reflecting back on it, I realize now she was going through depression, and you know, no one really stepped in to help her, and she's very proud and didn't want to go ask for help for some sort of mental health issue, for depression. So she just kind of dealt with it on her own. So, you know, I'm out running the streets, doing my thing. I would see witnesses from time to time out in the streets, out and about at stores or whatever. They would see me hanging out with bad crowds, dressed a certain way. And you know, you would see them whispering to each other, things like that. So when I was about 17, my mother decided, hey, I want to go back to the Kingdom Hall. So she came to me and told me, I'm going back to the Kingdom Hall. And I said, okay, that's good. You know, from 13 to 17, I had done research and I had started to want to know more about different religions and the doctrine of the witnesses. I had started to question, not super deep yet at that point, but there were things that didn't make sense to me. And so I didn't go back with my mother once she went back while she was disfellowshipped. Honestly, part of it was probably a little bit of embarrassment, you know, knowing she was disfellowshipped and we got to sit there and people can't talk to her. And some of it was, you know, I just didn't feel like I wanted to go live that lifestyle again. She went back. She ended up becoming reinstated in about 6 months, I think. And from that moment on, my mother changed. She was as bright as could be. It was like a light went off inside of her head, which made me feel good because she felt like she had her family back. And after she was reinstated, from what I could tell and what she could tell, no one really acted different towards her. So it was like she had never left. They came running up, hugged her, inviting her out to places all the time. So she was right, back where she felt like she belonged, and everything was better in the home. It was to me, it was a good thing. So after she was reinstated, I ended up going back with her to the Kingdom Hall, and it was actually refreshing to me to see my old friends who had grown up now. A lot of the young ladies who were little kids when I left, they weren't little kids no more. So I liked the Kingdom Hall for some of the wrong reasons. But I ended up going back, permanently going back, after going about 4 times. One of the brothers there came up and offered to study with me. He said, I know you know a lot of things already, but I don't know what your thoughts are, coming back, progressing towards baptism, things like that. So I ended up studying with them. And my plan was, at that point, I put some of the doctrine questions I had to the side. And because the family part, the social part of it felt good and felt like kind of what I wanted to do again. And I felt kind of back at home. So, and that's why, honestly, I think that's, to sidetrack for a minute, I think that's why a lot of people do it. A lot of people feel like, I don't really think this is the truth, and a lot of these things don't make sense, but this is my family, and socially, this is where I want to be. This is who I want to be around. So I'm going to suspend my common sense and just roll with this. And I think that's what a lot of people do. And that's what I did. I made a conscious decision to do it at that moment. But still, a lot of questions were lingering. So I end up studying for a while. And, I was probably 18, mid 18 or something. And I was supposed to get baptized at the district convention that was coming up in the summer. I had went through the questions and everything. I was set to get baptized. And then the circuit overseer came, and the circuit overseer said he was going to go out and field service with the brother who was studying with me for the day. So the brother called me. He was super excited. He said, quite an honor. This is such an honor. The circuit overseer gets to come to your study. And man, I'm so excited. So he was pumped up, and they come, the study was at my house. They come over to my house, and we go through the normal study. I answer all the questions. I knew all the questions. I mean, studying is kind of a joke. You read off exactly what they want you to say. You answer the question you just read, and you move on to the next paragraph. I mean, it's not real complicated. You just got to remember a little bit. But anyway, we get to the end of the study, and the circuit overseer said, hey, I wanted to know if there's any questions you had. Well, I had been waiting for this moment. I had planned for this moment, and I said, I'm going to get me some info now. I kind of felt bad about it afterwards, but there was a big green book. I forget what it was called, organization book or something at the time, but it had all of the pictures of all of the governing body members that I think they had ever photographed. Like, they were one after the other. All the pictures were in there. And it was always kind of strange to me that all of them had only ever been Caucasian. And so I asked the circuit overseer, I said, why? I did have a couple questions. I was looking through this book, and I noticed that you have to be white to be on the governing body ever. And I was just wondering why that was. There's people of all races in the organization all around the world. So why is that? The brother who was studying with me looked at me with the most angry face I've probably seen from anyone. He was just mad. Like, why are you doing this? You could just see that written on his face. The circuit overseer turned red. And I don't know if he was angry or embarrassed or what, but he turned beet red and kind of composed himself, took a couple deep breaths. And then the answer he gave me was that Jehovah doesn't see color. So that's why that is that way. And so I said, well, I understand that. But since Jehovah doesn't see color, then wouldn't it make sense that at some point a person of color were allowed to be a part of this governing body? And he just said, well, we don't want to question Jehovah. And since Jehovah doesn't see color, he doesn't really ever consider those things. And it could just happen to be that these brothers happen to be at the place and time where they ended up being selected. And basically a whole roundabout answer. So I said, okay, well, I have another question. I had looked at, I don't remember, my mom had them, or somehow I found them, some old watchtowers that had some of the old teachings about, people who were of color would actually be white in the news system, and things like that. And I asked about that, and I said these thinkings didn't really change until the civil rights movement happened in the country. So why is that? Shouldn't these things shouldn't Jehovah's organization have been ahead of the curve, not just going with everyone else? And he became very flustered and very upset at that time and said, no, well, there are men who were, in the organization at different points who can make mistakes and maybe have beliefs and teachings that aren't right, maybe even put those things in a print. And it's up to Jehovah to continue to give us new light and new understanding. Sort of my least favorite terms, new light. It's a joke. But it's up to Jehovah to help us with that. And Jehovah has helped us with that along the way. And so that's why our change, there's a change in our beliefs and a change in our thinking. So I could tell from the way he was acting and how his answers were becoming and how the brother was looking at me that I kind of needed to let it go for right then. I had so many other questions, but I kind of let it go and said, okay, I accept that. We were done. They left. The next day, the brother who was studying with me asked if he could come over. I said, sure, come on by. He came and said, hey, you can't get baptized at the district assembly or district convention. I said, well, I don't understand why. I already passed the questions and everything. He said, well, we just feel like after yesterday's study, your faith needs a little strengthening, and we want to make sure that your mind and your heart are in the right place before we progress to baptism. And I said, that's stupid, because I asked some questions. That's why. And they said, no, we just want to make sure your faith is right. Well, he said, we want to make sure your faith is right. So whatever. I guess I was being punished for asking questions. So I didn't get baptized. And then 4 months later, whatever it was, the circuit assembly was coming up. And the brother who was studying with me came back and said, hey, talk to the presiding overseer. If you want to get baptized now at the circuit assembly, you can. We feel like, with the studies we've had since then and all that, your mind, your heart's in the right place. So whatever. I guess I was punished for 4 or 5 months or whatever for asking questions. So I said, okay, great. I'll get baptized. Got baptized. And that was a good moment for me. At that time, my mother also started to date a brother in the congregation. He was an elder, and they got serious pretty quick. I think from their first date to them getting married was only about 4 months. It was very rapid, that I can recall. So all that kind of happened, me getting baptized and then that happening was all kind of in quick succession. So things seemed like they were back on the right track, but I still had all these thoughts. And the more I thought about it, I have a mind where I always want to know the whys of everything. I really want to understand everything, not just be told something. So the more I thought, the more I dug, the more I researched, looking at things like the Council of Nicaea, Sumerian text, so many different things along the way, not just related to Jehovah's Witnesses, but religion, period. Like I'm not a witness now, and I don't believe in the doctrine, but I also don't believe in the doctrine of other religions. So I couldn't see myself, after doing all this research, for me personally, I know everyone has their own opinion, but leaving the Jehovah's Witness organization and going to another church, because to me, they're all leaves of the same tree, from my research and my experiences and what I believe. So I really started to do research on all religions and origins of those religions and, all kinds of different things from all around the world. And the more I did, the more I knew, hey, this is not real. And I didn't really share all those thoughts with people, but I really felt like this is not real. And it's not something that I'm really going to see myself following. So the doctrine was the biggest thing that started to push me to make that decision. Then along the way, a brother who was actually the book study head of our book study. We ended up, my mom got married, we moved to a different house. We had a book study in our home, and there was a brother who was the book study head, and there was a young lady in the congregation who really liked me a lot. And she was running around telling everybody she's going to be with me, she's going to marry me. And I didn't want her saying that because there were some other young ladies in the congregation I actually did like, but she was running around saying that. But anyway, the brother had heard about me and what I had been doing from 13 to 17, somehow from someone. And he had heard some things about some violence out in the streets and me fighting people and things I had done in school and all kinds of other stuff. And so he went to their family study and he told them how violent I was and that I was not someone she should be looking at for a mate, and all kinds of other crazy things during their family study, because they were newer to the truth. And so he was studying with, I guess, the whole family at once or something. But she came and told me right away what was said about me. So one of the funny things that happened is I called the presiding overseer, and I said, I told him what was going on, and I said, this is slander. And he said, oh, it's not slander. I said, yes, it is. I'm always prepared. So I had researched like I was going to give a talk, and I looked up about 8 or 9 different scriptures about slander. And I had them already on deck, started reading them off. Boom, here's one, that's slander. Boom, here's another. And so he said, well, you know what? I'm going to let you deal with this with the brother. So I called the brother up. I said, I need to see you. And I understand you've been over at studies talking about me. You're my book study head. If you think there's a problem with me, then don't you think you should be talking to me? And so he was clearly flustered. He came over, and it was me, him, my mother, and my stepfather. So we were all 4 sitting there, and I read off the scriptures to him. And I looked right at him and said, so what you're doing is you're committing slander. And I said the things he had said about me. I said, do you know any of this to be true? And he kind of tried to beat around the bush. Well, I'm just, trying to watch out for the congregation. And I said, how are you trying to watch out? I just asked you, do you know any of this to be true? And he said, well, no, I don't. I haven't seen it. I said, so you haven't seen it. You don't remember where you heard it from, or you don't want to say. So you're gossiping. As an elder, you're gossiping, you're committing slander, and then you're doing things in an inappropriate way by talking about me in another family's book study. So he tried to really get, puff out his chest, like, hey, I'm an elder in the congregation, and you won't counsel me. And so I said, well, since you think I'm violent, if I were violent, I'd probably stand up right now and do something to you. And I stood up. And you could just see the fear in his face. He kind of sat back down in his chair and said, well, this is just turning into a bad conversation, and we need other elders involved. I said, you're right, we do. And we may need, someone at the headquarters involved, because you're an elder, you're committing slander, you are handling things wrong in the congregation. So let's do that. Let's get as many people involved as you want. And he started to back down then. From that moment on, though, and when he left, he just, I said, I want an apology. And basically, I'm not accepting anything other than an apology. Try to leave. I said, no, give me an apology. Then you can go. So he was furious. And my mom afterwards, she was cracking up because she said, I can't believe you were talking to him that way. But I don't care. Witness, no witness. You ain't going to come at me crazy. We're going to have a problem. So he ended up apologizing. And told the presiding overseer that I was threatening to beat him up. And so I said, well, shouldn't he have come with someone else anyway? Why did he come by himself? Because he knew he was in the wrong, and he came and had this conversation with us. So nothing ended up happening from that. The presiding overseer was kind of like, hey, I'm not doing anything here. This is between you guys and whatever. So, but he still had to be our book study head. So after that, the interactions were hilarious between us. I would just like stare at him sometimes just to mess with him. And he would like just have this nasty look on his face. Like he hated my guts. I knew it. But that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth when it came to the elders and when it came to the way that they operate. And so time went on though, and there's lots of other funny things that happened. I ended up in a judiciary committee. I'm going to do a whole nother video about that because it was hilarious. What happens in these meetings is hilarious to me. The questions they ask, the details they ask, their reactions is just, to me, it's completely hilarious, but I was trying not to laugh. So ended up in the judiciary committee because of some things I had been doing. And I was, I was wrong. You know, I was engaged in some activities with young ladies here and there, but didn't get this fellowship. I got privately reproved at that time, and then as time went on over the next couple years, I just really realized, I'm sorry, maybe only a year later, I really just realized, hey, all this is fake. And I had a conversation with my mom and showed her scripture, showed her the history of different things, talked to her about the new light. New light is what really pushed me. And man, the new light that the so-called new light that they've received now is even crazier. But the whole changing of the years, changed the false prophecies about Armageddon, false prophecies about different things that were going to occur. That was a big tipping point for me, because I'm like, come on now. It's a joke. If I tell someone it's going to rain tomorrow and then it doesn't rain, I can't come back 2 days from now and say, hey, I have new light. It's not going to rain yesterday now. It's going to be sunny. You know, that's not new light. That's me making an excuse because I was wrong. And that's all the new light is. That's why it's hilarious to me how people can really follow that. And my mom included, she's still a witness, still a regular pioneer right now to this day. And she ain't trying to hear it. You know, like whatever I show her or tell her, it wouldn't matter. I could show her proof. They could get up. That one brother, he's actually funny. He's in the governing body. I don't know his name, but he says, hey, boys and girls, this is amazing. You probably know who I'm talking about. Sounds like he's on Sesame Street. He could get up and say, hey, the organization's fake. Everyone should leave. And she probably still wouldn't leave. She would still be at the Kingdom Hall the very next day. That's just how much she believes in it. But I would communicate with her and tell her, look, you know, look at all these facts. Look at the reality of what's going on. That was before the child molestation and all of that. But there were still so many doctrine things, so many things that didn't make sense. So I just decided I can't do this anymore. Didn't write a letter, didn't go talk to the elders or anything. I just kind of left. I was done. I moved out because I didn't want to create a situation for my mom by me living in the house and not going to Kingdom Hall anymore. Because like I said, when she came back, she really kind of came back alive. So I get it. I don't believe in it. And I know some people stay there just for the family structure, just for the social structure. And believe me, I get it, because I saw it with my own mom. And I honestly think that's the main reason she stays. But she'll never say that. But I didn't want to, I mean, what do I have to give her in return? That's the one thing. If you try to enlighten people and try to get them to leave the organization, what do you have to give them in return? Because for some people, that's all they have in their life, you know. So I still talk to my mom about things and try to get her to see things and understand things, but I don't push it. You know, if she wants to leave at some point, she will. But everyone has to find that in their own heart, in their own time, just like I did and many others have. So I ended up just kind of, I guess, what you call fading away. Stop going to the Kingdom Hall, stop going to the meetings. I guess technically I'm still not disfellowshipped or nothing, so I guess I'm technically still a witness, but haven't been in many years. But just decided, you know, it's not for me. My mother still from time to time calls me and says, hey, you're not apostate, are you? Those things you tell me. I mean, to her, the word apostate is like a disease, like an incurable disease. And she thinks that it's such a big deal. And I said, no, I'm not apostate. You know, I guess if you look at the technical terms of the word, maybe I am. But what I am is I seek knowledge and I seek truth always. And I try to help her seek knowledge and truth, but she's not trying to see that. But that's kind of how I ended up where I am now. Lots of other funny stories, lots of details. That's kind of a macro view. There's lots of micro details that I'm going to talk about in later videos, but I wanted to get this first one out there to just kind of tell you who I am, tell you my story. So many funny things happen with my interactions with elders and ministerial servants, and once even a ministerial servant's wife that was kind of crazy that I'm going to talk about. But for me, a lot of things were funny. You know, I know a lot of these videos are pretty serious. People were pretty traumatized. But for me, so many things that happened were just so funny. And when I look back on it, like, it's hilarious, because a lot of these elders have no idea how to really lead people, or even counsel people or do anything. They're just dudes, you know what I'm saying? So they're just like trying to figure out. They were given this responsibility, and now somehow they're sitting in judiciary committees deciding people's future, and they have no idea. So it was just so funny to me. And now I'm in a good place in life, earn a really good living. in a really good career. And I look back at it now and look at things intellectually, and so glad I made the decisions. And I couldn't believe that at one point I was, you know, trying to just force myself to believe these things that I know aren't true. So anyway, that's my first video. I'm going to put a lot more up. There's so many more details I got from my different years in the organization, and outside of the organization, dealing with some witnesses along the way in different capacities. So that's it. Hopefully, you know, someone else can relate. If you have any questions, send me a message. I'll answer.